So I have just a few announcements. First off, thank you for coming today. I'm really glad to see so many of you here. I think it's going to be an amazing presentation. I've been hearing Kim talk about it the last month, and every time she gives me a little glimpse, I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. So I think you're in for a treat today. I do have a couple little things to mention to you. If you do need to go to the restroom, just exit the doors and go to the right, and there are the restrooms. I left some program information on your tables. We have some amazing programs for children, adults, teens. Take that brochure home with you if you'd like. You can register for events on the Sioux Center Public Library website and get more information. We also just started a winter reading program, which is for 5th grade to adult. Should be super fun and kind of get you into the idea of reading this winter. And there's 2 great grand prizes. So I hope you consider participating in that. I will be taking a couple of pictures throughout the presentation. If you would not like your photo taken, just see me at the end. I'll make sure I don't post it. But otherwise, we'll put her on Facebook. I also talked with Kim. Since she's quite a distance away from you, she is going to take her mask off during the presentation so that people can hear her better. If anyone has a problem with that, though, don't be shy. Raise your hand. She'll keep her mask on. Is anybody uncomfortable with that? Just give a little wave. Okay. Since you're fine with her, you'll be fine with me too then. So, all right. So at the end of the program, I'm going to be sending you a quick survey, probably in the next day or 2, just asking for your feedback. And I'd love to have you participate in that. It will take you about a minute to do so. And we are recording the presentation. So just want you to be aware of that. And Kim is going to be taking some question and answers at the end. So why are we offering this program? Why did we pick this book? The story behind that is our library was the recipient of a grant. And with that, we got a set of 8 copies of Women Rowing North. We were instructed to do it as a book club discussion, and then any additional follow-up that would come from that. So we did it as a book club discussion, and Kim has talked about that, or will be talking about that in her presentation. But I just thought there was a lot of meat in this book, and I wanted to get it out to the community in the form of a presentation. Kim's name was suggested to me. I thought she'd be the perfect fit. I asked her, it took a little bit of arm twisting, but she agreed, and I'm super excited that she did. So a little background on Kim, if you're not familiar with who she is. This is Kim Vaness. She has taught English for 30 years, most recently at Northwestern College. She is now self-employed, working for clients around the country through Kim's writing and editing service, and she and her reader husband, Dr. Jerry Vaness, live in Sioux Center. So join me in welcoming Kim today.
So as Julie said, my invitation was to speak in response to this book, Women Rowing North, Navigating Life's Currents and Flourishing as We Age. So what is this book about? In the words of Mary Piper, the author, this book is about specific issues women face as we transition from middle age, and then I shift this to older age. I like the way that sounds. How to cultivate resilient responses to the challenges we face. She says that women will make this transition typically in their 60s and 70s. So given that target audience, honestly, I was a little offended when the library's adult programming person asked me to speak. I just turned 55. Do I look that old? I know I'm getting kind of gray. But then I thought, this is an opportunity for me to think about this transition before it actually happens. And in reality, this transition has already begun for me. Because my husband is 16 years older than I am and retired last year, I too have transitioned out of full-time work as an English teacher and has, as she said, been self-employed at home. So some of the transitions she speaks of are already happening to me. On January 16, I came here to listen to the library book club discuss this book. And if you were part of that discussion, would you raise your hand? And I think we also have Lori Zwart online who was there as well. One woman said that this book is good for any audience to read because either you are in that age or you know a woman who's in that age. And I thought that was so true. I would like to highlight a few of the other points that members of the Library Book Club took away from this book. First, Pfeiffer rightly notices that women in this age are often caregivers. They may be in what's called the sandwich generation, right? You've heard that phrase, that they're caring for kids and grandkids, but they're also caring for aging parents. If women are retired or semi-retired, they are often asked to care through volunteering as well, because they have a lot of time on their hands. However, sometimes women aren't so good at caring for themselves. So a couple book club members liked the section where Pfeiffer talked about the legitimacy of saying no, that it's important to realize what choices we have and what choices we don't have, what's within our control and what's outside of our control. One of the best things Pfeiffer does in this book is gives us helpful language to use. When people ask us to do things, she suggests saying, "Let me think about that." Such an answer gives you time to consider whether saying yes would be a good thing, not only for the one asking, but for you. Pfeiffer invites us to see ourselves as part of a circle of caring, interdependent, as people who are both cared for and who care for others. I really liked that metaphor, a circle of caring. She points out that when generations interact, cultures flourish. If that is true, then older people are just as critical as younger people for the flourishing of all. Another helpful phrase Mary Pfeiffer offers that was highlighted by a book club member is that it's not time to worry yet. Many of us struggle with anxiety, the fear of the unknown, but it can be helpful to separate out what are real and present dangers and what are just possibilities, things that could go wrong. So put that phrase in your pocket, it's not time to worry yet. Several book club members mentioned her emphasis on positivity, which honestly comes more naturally to some of us than to others. At this age, in this time period, there is a growing list of things we are unable to do. Of course, I never was able to do a cartwheel, and that hasn't changed. But there are some things we can do better than before because our time is more flexible. One of those is listening. I know many older people, including my parents, who listen to kids or grandkids on the phone when the younger generations are commuting to or from work or when they're nursing their babies. These younger generations process their lives in these calls and benefit from soundboards with many more years of experience. A number of book club members connected to Pfeiffer when she described the experience of coming alongside a loved one as they passed away, that it was such an honor. Some of you who have worked as hospice volunteers, like my mother who is watching via Zoom, may recognize the hospice teaching that Pfeiffer highlights, that there are 5 essential conversations to have during that time. Please forgive me. I forgive you. I love you. Thank you, and goodbye. That's the first time I had heard those, and I thought those were really important. One book club member said, "There's so much wisdom in this book, even if I don't agree with everything." And I appreciated the generosity behind this comment. We can learn a lot from authors who don't share our general perspective or worldview. This comment reminded me of a quotation by Izzy Victoria Odious. "I love keeping an open mind. It's liberating to know the universe and our existence are not limited to my understanding." So as I share today, I hope that you will listen primarily for what is helpful. You don't have to internalize everything. Not everything shared today will be applicable to you or useful to you. But if you come away with 2, maybe 3 things to consider, I think the hour will be worth it. And at the end of my prepared talk, I will invite you to share what things resounded with you and what points that you may be resisting. The overall question that interested me as I thought about this topic was this one. What is it like for women to row north in Northwest Iowa? Having worked in higher education for 30 years, I place a high value on research. So that is what I did. Specifically, I employed qualitative research. Now, there are people in this room that know a lot more about qualitative research than I do, but I just want to explain briefly what it is. Whereas quantitative research involves collecting and analyzing data involving numbers, Qualitative research involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data to understand concepts, opinions, or experiences. I developed a simple interview tool to learn about the experiences of women living in Northwest Iowa who were in these transitional years between middle age and older age. 9 Northwest Iowa women were gracious enough to respond to my questions, either by email or in a telephone call. In some ways, these women may be representative of women in Northwest Iowa in their 60s and 70s because they come from different towns, not just a center. They come from different professions, as you see up here, and they come from different religious affiliations. But I will admit a limitation to my study is that they are not representative in that most of them have some form of higher education and would be in a middle to upper economic bracket. And also all of them are white. So whereas my interviews are not perfectly representative of the population in this age group in Northwest Iowa, I believe that what they shared can be helpful to us all. I also was able to talk to Jeannie Klein-Hessling, a doctor of nurse practitioner and psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and she is with us today. Will you wave, Jeannie? Because of her almost 40 years working in healthcare, she had important insights to share. Besides referencing Jeannie by name, I will be using pseudonyms for the women in my study, so you'll hear about Marcia, Colette, Carolyn, Cindy, etc. Here are the questions that shaped my research and will continue to structure our time here together. First of all, what is it like for women in Northwest Iowa to move from middle age to older age? How does living in this area make the transition easier or harder? And what wisdom can we take away from this book and from each other? So first the question, what is it like for women in Northwest Iowa to move from middle age to older age? For those of you who have read the book, you'll notice that some of the responses from my 9 interviewees echo what Piper says, but some may be more specific to Northwest Iowa. First of all, the challenges of this time of life. Let's start with the obvious, the physical challenges, which happen both in terms of appearance and in terms of one's health. As Joanne said, I feel young inside, but my body says otherwise. Marcia remarked, your body and appearance is definitely taking on a new look. Where did all those wrinkles and creases come from? We can laugh, but a changing body can affect our self-esteem. From the time we are born, comments are made about our appearance and value is attached to being attractive, physically attractive, even though our physical attributes are largely beyond our control. And societal and media messages suggest that the young are more attractive. Wrinkles, gray hair, and the weight gain that often comes with age are not considered particularly attractive in the United States. Of course, these attitudes are cultural. I remember being in the West Bank, and the Palestinian women who were serving us focused on me. They kept putting extra food on my plate because they thought I was far too skinny and not very attractive. In Asian cultures, many Asian cultures that I've come into contact with, there seems to be more respect for the aging and a sense of beauty associated with aging. But that attitude seems to be the exception in the US. In fact, Carolyn, one of the women I interviewed, suspects that she was laid off from her office job because of her aging appearance. Then there are the changes in physical ability and health. Jeannie says that women in this age group often experience a loss of bone mass, a loss of muscle mass, and the weight fluctuation that comes often from social changes. Sharon had to stop her hobby of running. She said, developing rheumatoid arthritis has been hard because I've continued to battle with inflammation, and 2 of those nasty inflammers that I like the most are sugar and white flour. Having to be more careful about my diet has been hard. Another challenge that some of the women faced was distance from family. Some women moved to this area for marriage or for jobs, and once their own kids were grown up and moved away, especially those who are single, wish for the comfort of having some family nearby. Kathy said, my friends are aging too. Who will help me when I need it as I age? When her own home gets too much for her to maintain, she plans to move closer to her children. Another thing that can happen during this time period is unexpected changes in relationships, including with a spouse or partner. For Kathy, the day her husband retired was the day he left her for another woman. Marcia's spouse was suddenly killed before they even retired. Clearly, a change in partner or marital status changes how we see ourselves and how our lives proceed. Marcia remembers these feelings after she lost her spouse, after he died. I struggled with the question of who needed me. I felt somewhat lost and very much alone. I wasn't sure where I belonged. I was too young to join that pew of widow women, but I was no longer a couple. I was still a mom, but I no longer had children at home, so I wasn't sure where I fit in. Jeannie said that at this time, women can also have shifts in their friendships because their friends may start to pass away, or their friends lose their physical and mental health, so activity options are limited, or they move away to a different area. Another challenge is feeling less needed or more needed by multiple generations. And this is something that really varied among the women I interviewed. Even though child raising can be so demanding, we can feel a little lost when they fly the coop. But some women never lose that responsibility because they are continuing to care for children with disabilities. For example, I have a friend who, her adult child with disabilities was living in a care facility, but because of COVID, she took her home. So she's been caring for her at home for a year. And my friend is in her 60s. So that's a challenge. Some women this age are raising grandchildren. I'm sure you have, people who are doing that. So they sometimes wish for more freedom. This next point was something I had not thought of at all, and that is the challenge of becoming the memory keeper, of feeling responsible for knowing and maintaining the traditions and the family history. You maybe have found yourself as the family matriarch. Colette shared this. A couple of weeks ago, my aunt died, the last of her generation. And come on in if you wish. And with her, the collective memory of the extended family. This means that my generation has now become the keepers of the family memories. The last challenge I'm going to talk about is a change in identity. We often talk about this identity adjustment for men as they retire, but the same is often true for women in this age group. When we introduce ourselves, the most obvious thing to share is our occupation. But once we retire, what explains who we are? Our job also often provides personal affirmation. As Marcia said, in this time of life, sometimes I find myself a bit unsettled. There are also perks. There are also perks that these women highlighted. First of all, for those who have good health, they do not take it for granted. For those who have strength, pretty easy mobility, for those whose hormonal changes happen without too much trouble, they are grateful. A number of women mentioned the perk of having less responsibility. Kathy said, I spent almost 30 years caring for a husband and children, and now I can just worry about myself. I have come to enjoy the freedom of doing what I want to do when I want to do it. Cindy was relieved to put her administrative position to rest. No more having to be the boss. Whereas I didn't resent my role in management, always having to be where the buck stopped carried responsibility. I don't miss handling weather decisions and employee issues. Joanne, a retired nurse, said, I no longer have a set schedule, so I am free to say yes when I'm asked to join someone for an activity. It is so nice not to have to check work commitments. And she appreciated being available to help family members when they needed assistance. With less responsibility also comes opportunities for learning and growth. One former teacher said, this has been a time to focus on intellectual pursuits purely for my own interests and not to get ideas for a class or presentation. They also talked about the perks of new relationships. Colette said, I've been making new friends. And thanks to modern technology, I've been able to keep up or reconnect with friends from long ago who live around the world. Others have developed new relationships from their volunteer activities. A couple women appreciated the opportunity to work part-time. Because they're drawing on retirement funds and Medicare, they didn't have to work full-time anymore for that full-time income or for insurance. So they had the choice to work part-time. Kathy said, my job gives me routine and a reason to arise in the morning. And in describing her job as a mental health counselor, Sharon said, I feel like my age brings a perspective to life and work with clients that I didn't have when I was in my 30s, 40s, or even 50s. My work brings me joy, a sense of fulfillment, and a sense of calling. But as I mentioned earlier, some women were very pleased not to have any paid employment and to be free of the schedule and responsibilities of work. So now I want to transition to looking at what it's like to make this transition specifically in Northwest Iowa. And we'll start with talking about what makes this transition easier about living here. Convenient amenities. Carolyn mentioned good local health care, fitness facilities, availability of part-time jobs. Most everything we need is within 5 minutes, right? 5-minute drive. This is something I haven't thought a lot of before, probably because I take it for granted, but a couple of women mentioned safety. A couple of the single women I interviewed brought up the value of a low crime rate. Colette said, this area is very safe for someone living alone. She said that where she grew up, it's not very safe, especially traveling and being out after dark. So for now, I remain here. A couple women mentioned the ease of socialization in this area. As a single person living in a Northwest Iowa small town, Kathy enjoys regularly running into not only friends, but acquaintances. I have many acquaintances that add value to my small town life. People I can nod to, greet, have short conversations with. I see these people at church, at my work, where I volunteer. These contacts make me feel comfortable in my setting and feel less isolated. In a city, you can go a whole day running around and not have direct interaction with anyone. I thought that was really interesting. Joanne would agree with the socialization benefits of living in a small town. People in Northwest Iowa are so nice, and it is easy to socialize and talk about things we have in common. That point is especially true if you've lived here a long time, as Marcia described. Typically, we have years of history with these friends. People know us, and we know people. I have a friend right there from junior high. Raise your hand. There you go. And sometimes those friends happen via interest groups. Sharon said, I'm in a Bible study and a book club that include a wide range of ages, but more women my age, and I've enjoyed that. For some of the women I interviewed, living near extended family became increasingly valuable to them as they aged. Some women are part of 4 generations living in Northwest Iowa. Therefore, holidays and other special occasions are especially meaningful because they include extended family. Maybe not so much during COVID, but in general. As Cindy said, there's a familiarity to this aging transition because the same people are part of my life. Others have, I love this phrase, chosen family, who have become part of their traditions. And Jeannie pointed out another advantage of living in this area, and that is the colleges. We are fortunate to have right here in our county 2 liberal arts colleges and a community college so close by to enjoy their cultural events, their sporting events, their educational forums. And sometimes it's not till we're in that transitional time of life that we have the time to pursue some of those things. Now, how does living in Northwest Iowa make the transition harder? And it's interesting that some of these are the flip side of what we discussed as advantages to living in this area. From the picture, can anyone guess my first point? Of course, the weather. Carolyn pointed out that the Northwest Iowa climate impedes fitness, as the easiest way to exercise is to step out the door and go for a walk. But sometimes ice makes that prospect pretty dicey. Joanne said, it's hard to want to go out when the weather is bad. Another thing that can make this transition harder is that there are kind of set social groups. Jeannie said people get hardwired into a certain friend group or religious group, and it's hard to be flexible. Marcia said, I remember when my mom moved into my town's independent facility to be closer to me. Because she didn't grow up here and moved here when she was older, she often felt like she didn't fit in. She didn't know very many people or the history that went along with their memories and stories. Everyone was very friendly and welcoming. It was just more difficult to find that good friend when you get older. And as Kathy said, many people in Northwest Iowa have family, but I do not. So it's easy to feel left out when people talk about all their family events. But in the case of Colette, her family lives on 3 different continents. So she said, it doesn't matter where I live, I'll always be distant from someone. Now, I'm feeling pretty proud of the tactful way I worded this next point. Are you ready? How do you like that? And I think you know what I mean by being overly known. Carolyn said, people in Northwest Iowa seem to know or can find out one's business quite easily. This can be annoying, but also very nice when it produces care or concern. Personally, I remember one time being congratulated at church for my pregnancy, which was news to me. So not everything that goes around is even true. Some of the women brought up employment challenges. Jeannie notes the double challenge of being female and growing older when it comes to the workplace. Women's place, this is what she said, women's place in the workplace is not valued enough in Northwest Iowa. It is harder to grow a career at this age than it is for men. Women may not be challenged to take on new roles in their workplaces. And given that we might not be perceived as being as attractive as we once were, we might not be as valued at work. I was thinking about this. Would America ever consider making a 78-year-old woman president? In Northwest Iowa, we aren't often open and direct about this kind of discrimination, but I think it's important to consider to what degree Jeannie's words are true. Another thing that is not necessarily easier about living here is the limits to the amenities. Some of the specialists we need to see as we grow older are out of town. My parents make a lot of trips to Sioux Falls for specialists. Our shopping is limited. And there aren't the experiences in nature that some might long for, like for Sharon, who grew up in the Pacific Northwest, surrounded by trees, water, mountains. But even she has found natural beauty here. These are her words of things that she's appreciated about nature in this area. Lots of sunshine, the beauty of winter days, the sunsets, and the rolls of silage in the fall. The final challenge about making this transition here I'm going to talk about is that women also mentioned the limited diversity of this area. Though this area is less homogeneous than it used to be, this is what Cindy said. This area is less diverse than, say, some urban areas with regard to culture, politics, education, and life experiences. When one does not embrace the prevailing paradigms of religion, social constructs, traditional roles of women, etc., then one can expect to feel as though they are swimming upstream. But I've learned to navigate those waters and to be okay with myself in spite of rowing against the current. One of my favorite questions that I asked the women, the last question I asked them was, what choices have you made during this transitional time that you feel good about? And these are some of the positive choices, the themes that came up in their answers. One is they talked about adjusting expectations. For Carolyn, it meant realizing that what she used to do would now cause her too much stress. So sometimes when all the family is coming over, they have it catered rather than cooking and being on her feet for 3 days. She will hire a house cleaner, at least before guests come. She sends out fewer Christmas cards. She limits her seasonal decorations, making those adjustments, but not feeling like you're less than because of it. Another choice that people feel good about is trying to be as healthy as they can. And that means both physically and emotionally. For Sharon, some of the things she does is she stretches for 15 minutes every morning. She gets out in nature as much as she can, which helps her physically and emotionally. And for her emotional health, she travels to Washington every year to see friends and family. In this area, we tend to really value productivity. Some people call that a Calvinist work ethic. And so I kind of liked having this point brought up by the women, and that is just enjoying leisure. Taking the time for things they enjoy without guilt, like books, travel, crafting, manicures, and even a nap. Another point brought up is women were pleased with their choices to take a leap, to do something new or out of the ordinary, even as older women. For Carolyn, that leap was remarriage and moving to a different town. For Marcia, that leap meant serving on her church consistory as an elder. She said it was a very meaningful and purposeful mission in servant leadership ministry for me. I have continued to maintain and nurture many of those relationships. For Colette, the leap was leading a small group in prayerful reflection on scripture via Zoom. What initially seemed intimidating, technology can be that way, right, Julie? Mm-hmm. Turned out to be enriching because it included women from different states and even different countries. And other positive choice that they highlighted was investing in relationships. It was during this time that many of us become grandparents. This features a couple of my chairs on here. And I'm happy my daughter-in-law is with me today. So here's what Marcia said about this role. One of the greatest delights is being a grandmother. I thoroughly enjoy each child. Her grandchildren range from toddler to teenager and the joy they bring to my life. I'm thankful that as they grow older, they see wisdom in me that points them to the Father. But this isn't just a time for grandkids. It's a time for coffee and adventures with friends. I like what one of the interviewees said, Sharon, she said, finding people to laugh with is critical for my sanity. It may also be a time for reinvesting in your spouse or other family members. For some, it becomes a calling to physically care for that person in your home, an experience that can be both challenging and rewarding. And finally, a positive choice they highlighted was volunteering. Women in my study volunteered as part of a music team, for a nonprofit store, for political campaigns, and with the Red Cross. Cindy volunteers teaching English to a non-native speaker. She said this, "Well, I don't speak Spanish. I have helped this couple get their driver's license, taken the mom and daughter to an appointment in Sioux Falls, connected them to community resources, and just become really good friends." About volunteering, Susan explained, volunteering uses the time and energy I spent when working. I can still contribute to society by helping in areas that are important to me. Next, I would like to mention just a few other things that were shared specifically by Jeannie Klein-Hessling. And the first one is to foster supportive relationships. This kind of ties to some things we've talked about, but Jeannie makes the point that if a relationship is too much work to maintain, it might be time to let it go. Tied into what one of the women I interviewed said, Cindy said, I focused on persons and relationships that bring joy and meaning to my life, and worked at letting go of those relationships that aren't grounded in honesty and commitment. Healthy boundaries are part of caring for self, which is a good thing. And it's not surprising that a healthcare professional would tell us to move. Movement has physical, mental, and emotional benefits. You don't have to become a runner. Just find something that you enjoy in a class or alone, outside or inside. She also encouraged us to dare to try, especially when our social situation changes, like when we leave our jobs. We may need to branch out and do some new things to fill our time and to build the relationships that we need. So you could try attending a birding event. Do you know there's a birding club in Sioux County? You could become a college theater patron. You could volunteer at your local school. And I'm really glad that she mentioned this last point, be open to therapy. We often talk about this transitional time of life as being difficult for men, but it can really be hard for women too. Some of us may be reluctant to see a mental health professional for a number of reasons. For example, we may believe the lie that says, if we have enough faith, we won't worry. Jeannie says that faith is not the cure-all for mental illness. Environmental stressors can affect our emotions, so we need to ask for help when needed. Women are often caregivers, so it might be hard to admit that we need some taking care of ourselves. But if we aren't well ourselves, it's going to be really difficult to care well for others. I will be the first to say that mental health counseling has been very helpful to me at different stages of my life. So I am so grateful for these women for sharing their experiences and wisdom with me. So how do I encapsulate what I've learned? I think that now when I think about this time of women's lives, I think about this word, redefining. And I saw this word from Marcia, who said, this transitional time of life is the opportunity to rediscover and redefine yourself. It's often a chance to choose things you'd like to devote your time, energy, and attention to. You can be much more intentional about what you'd like to be involved with. I think it's a time to rethink our life's purpose and to set our own standards. On what basis will I judge my value? Will I judge it based on if I have financial stability, if I'm treating my body well, if I have healthy relationships with family, if I'm enjoying faithful friendships, if I'm experiencing spiritual growth, if I'm helping those less fortunate, if I'm expanding my mind, or some combination of the above. I think these are things, it's a good time of life for women to ask these questions. My former neighbor, Joan Mao, just passed away at the age of 91. She was known for saying, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. I had to think about that a little bit. The purpose of life is a life of purpose. My experience and observation is that when purpose goes beyond self-pleasure, that's when life has meaning. To do this, I think we also need to redefine beauty. I have become increasingly convinced that from the moment a female baby is born, we need to think differently about beauty. The capacity, like I said, for physical beauty is largely out of our control. But instead, we could redefine beauty with characteristics like curiosity, beauty as generosity, as authenticity, as faithfulness, and as love. Let me close my prepared remarks with a story from the book, Women Rowing North. In 2017, author Mary Pfeiffer was attending a retreat in New Mexico. The attendees were encouraged to walk around outside and look for something that spoke to them in the desert topography. After wandering around for a while, she spotted it, a large cholla cactus covered with yellow pears and thorns. After a while, she came to this conclusion. I realized that this cactus with its withered arms symbolized what my life would be. It would consist of thorns and fruit, pain and beauty. My body would age, my soul would expand. My body would age, my soul would expand. Thank you. Now, I would love to listen to you and hear from you. Did anything I shared seem like something you want to hold on to? Or were there things I shared that you're kind of resisting, pushing back? Go ahead, I can take it. It's your turn. And I'm gonna ask you to speak, and then I might summarize what you said for the sake of our Zoom listeners. Go ahead, Ruth.
What you said about the casual contacts from day to day, you know, like in the grocery store, the church, you know, et cetera. that made me think about something I learned in a course that I took from Coursera called The Science of Happiness from Yale. And the course reported on one study I thought was interesting, and that was they gave people the assignment of talking to a stranger on the train. And then they would call them up on their cell phone later to measure whether their happiness had increased, remained the same, or decreased, having a conversation with a random stranger. And they found that almost universally their happiness increased. So the fact that we can have contact with people that we know that brings us more happiness, that's wonderful. But we can also say hello to a total stranger and strike up a conversation, like in a waiting room or in a line or, whatever contact we might have. And maybe that person that we strike up the conversation with doesn't have as many contacts as we do. Maybe they are newer to Sioux County, or, maybe they moved in because they wanted to move closer to family here or something. So it made me think that I need to do more of that because, you risk something by starting up a conversation with a stranger, but mostly it's really well received because people are hungry for that personal contact. So that's my encouragement, to not only have those brief conversations. It doesn't have to be a long conversation or a meaty conversation. It can be a conversation as you're checking out your groceries in the grocery store. It just, whatever it is, it does add happiness, and there's a scientific basis for concluding that.
Thank you, Ruth. Lori, on Zoom, were you able to hear her comments? Oh, they were able to hear it. It kind of reminds me of this greeting often used in Zimbabwe, which I just love. Instead of saying, hello, how are you? One will say, I see you. And the other person will respond, then I am here. I think that is just profound. It's almost this assumption like, I'm not here unless I'm seen, right? I just think that's beautiful. Thank you, Ruth. Someone else? Yes, Stephanie.
I love your comment about redefining beauty, like from like an infant girl. And I think that gives grace to our girls growing up. And I teach 110 middle schoolers every day. And also gives grace to them growing up and how they see themselves, but also as women as we age. So if beauty is in how we treat people and how generous we are, and then we see ourselves in a different light through all the stages of our lives. Whether like right now I'm raising my 2 middle school girls, but then also in my 50s and 70s. I just love that as a spiritual image.
Thank you. Stephanie liked the comment about redefining beauty. My daughter-in-law knows that with her 2 girls, my granddaughters, that I try to make many more comments about things that are not about their appearance, which is challenging because they're darn cute. But, they're the cutest grandkids there are. You know that, right? But even in commenting on pictures or things like that, I try to use words like sweet, fun, clever, other comments, loving, kind, right? I think those are the things we really want to affirm in girls all the way on up. Capable, right? Valerie.
I just really enjoy just listening to women's stories and hearing their perspective and being together as women. It feels just really empowering to me, and just that just having the opportunity to listen to each other and hear one another. I really appreciate that And not necessarily anything specific, but I just was sitting thinking, this just gives me a lot of hope. I think that was the general feeling. I was just having inside, was like, I'm feeling hopeful about the next phase of life. There's some pieces of this phase of life which the transition's been hard for me. And so I'm like, well, what will the next phase be like? Will that, transition to that phase? And so this is giving me a lot of hope and promise and things to like forge into and be more noticing certain things that I want to cultivate in my life. And so I just really appreciate just thinking about these areas, ways, positive choices that we can make to cultivate and all that. So I appreciate it.
Thanks, Valerie. Valerie highlighted the opportunity to hear the stories of women and to be with women thinking about these things, and also that it made her feel hopeful about the next stage of her life. One thing I would connect to that is I'm really pleased that that's what you heard, because I was honest about the challenges, but I did want hope to come through louder. And I think one thing that gives us hope is when we have a sense of agency, right? Is understanding that there's some things, not everything, but some things we have control over and can make some choices that affect the quality of our life. Joan, did you have something? I thought you were raising your hand a while ago.
No,
so.
I think this whole season has been pretty light with COVID and politics and all the stuff has been really challenging, right? And so it's thinking one thing that I've been reflecting on is just what is it mean to be resilient. And I think this whole just on aging is this whole idea of trying to acknowledge the hard and breathe the challenges, the difficulties, and hold on to those things that are good, and to find those two of holding. And I think that's kind of come through your whole presentation. It's hard. That's it. But then, the sense of loss, but also the sense of discovery. And I think it just reiterates that whole piece for me again of anticipation that we can grow through life. We can grow through loss and flourish. I think it's that piece of that you're.
Thank you. You kind of brought us full circle to Mary Piper's comments. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What Joan was highlighting was being able to be honest about what's really hard, but still be resilient about how we can go forward. Thank you. I have an older friend who is struggling with a lot of things because she has, some changes have been kind of foisted on her. And that never feels very good. And some of them have been COVID related. And I think she feels like if I express sadness or my deep sense of loss, then I'm not grateful for what I do have. And I am grateful for what I have. And I've tried to tell her, you can be feeling both of those things simultaneously. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Kate.
I think the growing is an action, and it's hard work. I mean, we've seen it as an Olympic sport. You're rowing, that's hard work. But I think of going along with that, to acknowledge that, yeah, life isn't, looking through rose-colored glasses isn't always maybe the answer, because there are sad things, there are bad things, but to come through that, like was said, and find joy and contentment, and to do things that you can do, not just to sit and go, for me, but to do things to try to improve. And some of the women in this book did that. They looked at things and took some action to improve some things that they could improve. And it can bring joy to your life.
Thank you. Kay brought up the aptness of the metaphor, the overall metaphor that Mary Piper used about navigating, and rowing is one of the things she talked about. Kay mentioned working toward joy and contentment. Thank you. Jeannie, was I fair about summarizing what you had told me?
I think so.
Anything you would add?
I think sometimes that we don't value our mothers, our mothers' friends, our aunts, you know, and the wisdom that they have and how they have negotiated with change. And some of them are very bitter about it. Some of them are very gracious. And I think of my mother-in-law, how she has gone to 90. She will be 90 this year. And it's just, I do what I can.
Could you hear that, Lori? Thank you. Thanks, Jeannie. That's a good addition. I never lived near my older relatives because I grew up here and they were all in the Pella area. And I really feel like that was something missing in my life, to have some of those older relatives nearby. Now I think it's easier to be in contact with them because of technology. Well, I really appreciate your attention and the things that you shared. I hope that you can take some of this with you, not only for yourselves, but to be aware maybe of what other women might be experiencing and to bless their lives. So thanks again.
So in closing, I just wanted to say that we have 8 copies of this book. I also have discussion questions. So if any of you would like to do a book club discussion with some of your friends, you can go ahead and get the discussion questions from me and the books. I believe right now we are short on some of the books. They need to come back because quite a few people checked them out before this presentation happened. But check back at the library maybe next week if you would like to do a book club discussion on your own involving this book. And of course, I want to put a plug in for book club. I offer that once a month on Saturday mornings at the exact same time, 10 a.m. And we discuss books from all different types of genre. And it's a great way to get to know people in your community. So if you're looking for a way to branch out and explore some interesting conversations, I encourage you to come. You don't have to purchase a book. You can get it from the library. So just want to put a plug in for that. And again, I thank you so much, Kim, for coming today. This was just outstanding, and I appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
All right, and you're free to go, or you can mingle around and ask questions. Still stick around for a little bit, right?
I'll get my mask.
Okay, thank you so much.